like to get started by asking you to tell us your name, who you are, what is your job title, and what do you do within that role?
So my name is Robin Longworth. I'm the head of humanities at Le Région International School in Montana in Switzerland. And we're very lucky to live high up in the mountains. It's actually snowing today where we are here now. And my role as head of humanities, I manage a team of economics teachers, business studies, history, geography, and global societies, and I teach geography too.
Did you always think that you wanted to work in the humanities and in schools and teach geography, or how did that come about? Was it kind of a lifelong dream and a childhood dream, or was it something that you kind of figured out along the way?
I've been teaching for 20 years now, and have always loved it. I didn't kind of from an early age think, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to be a teacher. I love sports and I coached some sports as a teenager and actually nearly read a degree in psychology because I was so fascinated by learning and cognitive science and the process of how we process information and understand and learn. Um, but I also simultaneously loved geography and loved the outdoors, particularly the physical geography. And so I guess marrying those two things together after a undergraduate degree in geography led me to a master's in education, training to be a teacher, and then on that journey over the last 20 years, I've worked in pastoral roles. I've been a housemaster. I've managed departments, faculties in the UK, France, Switzerland. Um, and I think it's about community and connection as much as anything. And I think that's one of the things that makes Le Région really special. And kind of, I guess, combining that love of geography and the mountains, and being very fortunate to live in this kind of action-packed outdoor lifestyle with managing people that I love doing, and then teaching that subject in a really lovely community here in the mountains is kind of, I guess, that journey of me from an aspiring teacher choosing teaching to where I am today.
Have you always worked within an international school environment, or is La Région, would you say, kind of like the most international or multicultural environment where you have worked and taught?
So in France, I was a stagiaire, so I worked in a school in France with French kids, and then in the UK, I've worked in day schools in London that are really academic, that are very multicultural, very multi-religious in London. But I've also worked in more rural parts of England with very traditional, old school English boarding school feel. But then I've worked in very international boarding schools, both in the UK, at a Quaker school, Leighton Park, with a very diverse set of international students and students from the UK. I've worked at Beausoleil before as well, so I've worked at an all boarding international. And now La Région, we're a mixture of local students, Swiss local students, and then a whole mixture. We've got 60 different nationalities of students here. So I guess to answer your question, it's a real mix of schools in different countries I've worked in.
The reason for my question was I was wondering, especially within the disciplines of the humanities, whether you had noticed any differences when you teach in a very English rural school, let's say, and the way that you would teach that in an international Swiss boarding school.
Yeah, I potentially huge differences. For example, at the moment, geopolitical issues that we're discussing, as part of the HL geography course, we look at power, at places, at networks, and what's playing out with the Straits of Hormuz now and the influence on global trade, the geopolitics that's involved. With an international cohort of students, that's an incredibly sensitive topic for many. I teach students from the USA and Iran and many other countries involved. And so the way you navigate that has to be so much more careful and sensitive, but also the range of views and opinions and ideas that the students bring is so diverse. And that I think adds a real richness in comparison to the UK, where you might, look at a Eurocentric or even a UK-centric perspective on that. And in that context, you've got to kind of break them out and show them, well, what's the Middle East perspective on this? What's the Iranian perspective? What's the US perspective? Here you have all of them in the classroom. That rich melting pot, I think, for humanities makes it a very exciting place to be.
Yeah, in my mind, it almost would feel like it's more of a bilateral exchange in that case, right? Because the students themselves can bring very interesting perspectives on it, and some stories also, or some context
Yeah.
to the situation that is being studied. And it's not just always the teacher trying to impart that knowledge or to show them what are the different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're not thinking about geography, humanities, pastoral care, what do you like to do, especially in such a beautiful place like Comontana? I imagine that you like to spend a lot of time outdoors, but I'd really love to hear about what you do to not be thinking about work and just to be Robin. What
Yeah.
what are some
Um,
activities?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm here with my family. My wife and I, we have two kids who are 10 and nearly 12. And you're right. Like, a big part of life is being outside, whether that's snowboarding, skiing, hiking, mountain biking, swim in the lakes. I love to be outside. And I guess there's that love of geography is embedded in that kind of love of me of being in the outdoors. And particularly now, as my kids get older and older, sharing those experiences with them, pushing them, challenging them, experiencing those different environments and things in the outdoors. So yeah, I guess that's me outside of the classroom.
Do you still find any time to, for example, read or watch TV if you're spending so much time teaching, managing people, and outdoors? These are not necessarily activities that are very conducive to any of the others that we talked about already.
Yeah, no, I do. And I think um, my journey in reading, I wasn't really a voracious reader as a child, particularly. Parents were always tried to persuade me to be, and I wasn't. And I think that journey took me more into nonfiction for a long while, and exploring whether it was reading about my favorite tennis player or an adventurer, or books like Joe Simpson's Touching the Void, kind of understanding what exploration in mountains might be like. So no, I do. It's tricky with family life, with balancing those things. And actually, when in my last job I was back in the UK, when the rain hits and you're there and you're kind of in the UK through winter, there's a lot more reading. Whereas here, actually, as long as there's light, we're outside. But no, when the sun goes down here in the mountains, I do like to read.
What about music? Do you have any connection to music at all? Is it a hobby that you enjoy?
Yeah, so I've played guitar my whole life. Not particularly well, but I love it. And played in a rock band when I was at school. And then more recently, loving my son learning the ukulele. And he's just got an electric ukulele for his birthday, so really enjoying that journey of music. And yeah, love listening to everything from hip hop to Jack Johnson and more kind of folky things to reminiscing and listening to some of the rock of my youth.
We're 3 weeks away from EduFest exactly today.
Yeah.
What can EduFest attendees expect to hear about in your session? What's going to be the topic, and what are going to be kind of some of the key takeaways, so to speak, for someone that attends your session?
Yeah, so I'm going to be exploring self-regulated learning. So I'm going to start off by looking a little bit at the research, help the attendees to kind of understand the mechanisms of self-regulated learning, what that looks like. Because I feel increasingly in schools we're getting really good at metacognition. Sometimes in separate standalone lessons, whole learning to learn programs in some schools, like my last school in St Albans. Um, and we're also simultaneously, as tutors, as people working in pastoral care, I think getting better and better at supporting students in their self-regulation. It's been a challenging period of time through the pandemic, post-pandemic, students' access to phones, streamed media, AI. It's a complex world and a changing world that our students are navigating. And I think we're doing things better and better in those two spheres, but I think we don't often combine that metacognition and that self-regulation as well as we could in the classroom. So that's where self-regulated learning sits in that space between self-regulation, managing the addiction to phone and the metacognition and thinking about why you didn't apply something as effectively as you could. And the Education Endowment Foundation in their 2021 kind of exploration said that, self-regulation, low cost, very high impact, based on extensive research. But yet there isn't a great deal of talk about self-regulated learning necessarily in the same way that there might be metacognition. So what I want the attendees who come to my session to kind of learn and think about and explore is, I said, first to kind of think about the evidence base on education, on self-regulated learning, and to kind of think about what a self-regulated learner looks like, both in terms of in themselves. As teachers, I think we're often quite good at reflecting, of planning, of reviewing, but then also how we can identify it in students, how we can support them to develop those skills, and also our staff, the people that we manage, whether that be through the bigger picture of our professional development program, our appraisal system, or whether it's actually just as individuals. So the first phase, the first part of the session will focus on that. And then the second part, I want it to kind of phase into more of a workshop, potentially collaborative, depending on who's in the room, providing people with the opportunity to kind of explore a range of strategies, to have time to plan how they might use and adapt those to their context. I feel often that we go to sessions, to PD, listen and go, oh, wow, that's amazing. And then we go to another one. But I actually want to provide a bit of time in that moment for the attendees to think about, okay, for me as a learner, or me as a teacher, or me as a manager or leader, how can I apply some of these concepts of self-regulated learning to the work that I do?
I was just going to say, I feel like the key is really the application of it, right? You're right that when we go to different talks and conferences and workshops, we can very often leave these places feeling very enthusiastic about everything that we've just heard and learned. And then we may feel a little bit lost actually when it comes down to thinking, okay, now it's time to apply it. How do I do that? Or sometimes we may not even get to the point where we start to think about how do we apply it because we go back to our quote unquote normal lives, right? And the usual rhythm of things. And then we just get lost in that. So I think it sounds fascinating. I hope that many people will be in attendance to be able to really leave the session with some kind of practical ideas and a toolkit, so to speak, of things that they can already implement in the classroom and with a group of learners. Is there anything else that you want to share with our audience today before we say goodbye?
I don't think so, actually. I think we've covered everything. Yeah.
Super. Well, we're so excited, Robin, to be able to welcome you on our beautiful campus in Hall in 3 weeks' time. Thank you again for taking the time this morning to talk to us. And we're so looking forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Me too. Thanks so much, Philip. Take care.
My pleasure.